In the 1990s, a new generation of criminals has emerged. Young people, seemingly out of control, beyond the reach of police, parents, schools. Juvenile delinquency, once so shocking, is now a permanent feature of modern life. Persistent young offenders have become the law's untouchables.
When you nick a car, all you need is a screwdriver. Just bang it in the lock, lift it up and down to the left and right, and the lock pops open. That's the door open. Just smash the casing off the ignition barrel, undo it with a screwdriver and just turn it, put it in and turn it, and that's the car starting.
But it's not just petty offending that generates anxiety. Violent crimes by young people have increased. Last year, a schoolboy, CJ Rickard, was murdered by a 15-year-old. These savage acts cause outrage and bewilderment across the nation. Even schools, which should be havens of peace, now seem under threat.
You can't be around your kids 24/7. You can't always protect them. I mean, it's not as if he was a 5-year-old. He was coming out of school, and you think he's going to be safe anyway, walking out of the school gates. You would never imagine that this is going to happen outside of school. It shouldn't happen anywhere.
Frances Lawrence and her family were devastated by the murder of her husband Philip, a head teacher, who was stabbed to death by a teenager outside his school. But she has turned personal tragedy into a crusade to halt the tide of youth violence.
There's a very unhealthy acceptance of this culture of violence. When I saw the knife that had killed Philip, this was not a knife that one keeps in one's kitchen drawer. This was a knife whose only purpose and only intent was to maim or to kill someone.
The biggest headache for police since the 1980s is what they call the one-boy crime wave, a tiny minority who commit 2/3 of all juvenile crime. Just a handful of these tearaways can devastate a community. When Nathan was 13, he embarked on his criminal career.
My record, touching 47 previous convictions. It just started off silly things like pints of milk off people's doorsteps and car stereos and silly things like that. Then that got boring, so I thought I'd go on to bigger things, like nicking the actual car, theft, fighting, possession of cannabis, all different things like that. To top it off, street robbery. I should have been put away a long time ago, I feel anyway. I've been in a lot of trouble, and I think if I'd have done a sentence at an early age, 15, 16, been banged up in Feltham, then that would have changed my mind and I'd have stopped it. I know I would have.
In 1997, Nathan agreed to be filmed for a year. He was 17 and had committed dozens of offences, but had never been to prison. In January, after taking LSD, he was arrested for street robbery, but he was still freed, let out on bail waiting for a trial, which wouldn't take place for another year. His story is typical of the struggle to deal with young criminals, and Nathan's parents can't understand where they went wrong.
That's too bright! Get it away!
Whenever I'd seen anything about children on the news, I used to say, oh, where are their parents then? I've tried everything, and it's still happening. So, when I hear things now, I think, I know exactly what them people are feeling, because they've probably thought the same as I used to. Where are the parents?
One of Nathan's acts of teenage rebellion was to draw graffiti all over his bedroom wall, to the dismay of his father.
I get the feeling at one point in Nathan's life he thought that I hated him because he actually writ it on his bedroom wall. I don't hate Nathan. I hate the things he got up to. I love him dearly, but the love gradually subsides. It doesn't mean to say that the love isn't there, but it's very difficult to say or put it into words when you feel something for your child and your child gets up to things that Nathan has got up to.
When Nathan was a child, his parents did their best to provide him with a happy home and the treats and toys that children crave.
Last Christmas I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away. This year,
His father, Tom, had been in the army and was proud to wear his military uniform on formal occasions. Tom relished the army's emphasis on self-control and discipline, values he tried to impart to his small son.
I didn't like the way his father brought him up. He used to make his son stand to attention and things like this. And I'm not saying my brother's all to blame, but he shouldn't have done that, not when he was young. You don't do them sort of things.
Nathan enjoyed a close and loving relationship with his mother, Lynn. But when he was 9, his sister April was born.
I suppose where I was so young, it was jealousy because she was the baby and she had all the attention. It was like I was being pushed to the side, and I got jealous and started giving it like to my mum and dad.
Too often, the arrival of a new baby can make emotionally vulnerable boys go off the rails, and Nathan's moodiness was made worse by the dullness of his physical surroundings. The family home was on the Isle of Sheppey, off the Kent coast, a place of windswept heathlands, run-down holiday resorts and flat horizons. Sheppey overlooks the waters of the North Sea. Like many communities, it harboured a small band of troublemakers. They acted as a magnet to Nathan. And by the time he was 12, he was hanging around with a gang of older boys at the local comprehensive.
The school rang up and they said that he hadn't attended. Is everything okay? And we said, well, yeah, he's attending school, isn't he? Well, no. And then we realised that we had a problem.
Nathan's parents discovered that, like so many children who truant, he had been shoplifting and stealing from neighbours' houses.
I started learning about criminal activity through mates, and I suppose it just escalated from there. I didn't really mean for it to happen, but at the end of the day, all my mates were giving it, yeah, let's go do this, let's go do that, and I'm an easy-led person anyway, so I think that's a lot of the reason.
Tom, with his love of neatness and order, was always much stricter than his wife. He and Lynn often argued about how to control their wayward son.
We went through various avenues with him, from the point of talking to him to the point of me actually hitting him. But I felt guilty every time, because I'm very fiery and so is Nathan. We're very, very, very short fuse, and he would say something or do something which would just make me snap. Sad to say that it has entered my mind that the best thing for Nathan is to put him in hospital for a little while, just to get him away from the kids that he was hanging around with.
Tom and Lynn tried imposing curfews, telling their 13-year-old son to come home by a certain time, but he ignored them. They tried locking him up at night, but he climbed out of his bedroom window. Nothing could keep Nathan away from his friends and their futile acts of petty crime. Nathan spent less and less time in school, preferring to roam the streets of Sheppey and hang around amusement arcades. 18 months after he started truanting, the inevitable happened.
The police just come and knocked on the door, and I was just... And they said, well, Nathan, you've got to come down the police station with us, and can you come? And I was absolutely devastated. I mean, the only time I'd ever been in a police station was to report some money that I'd lost. And I just can't describe my feelings. I was ashamed. I felt really sick just being in the police station.
What are you here for today? Don't shrug your shoulders at me, young man. Why are you here today?
Since the mid-80s, young offenders under 16 have been dealt with by police in the community in an attempt to avoid locking them up in institutions. The police used the caution, basically a ticking off under warning.
She can't walk around with her head held high now, can she? And say, I'm proud of my lad, the thief. Can she?
In 80% of cases, it works, but the hard core is indifferent to the caution.
I don't want to see you back in this police station. Because if you do, you'll be charged, and you'll go to court. And that's your future written off then, isn't it? You've made your mistake.
All the caution is basically is just slap on the wrist. Don't do it again. It ain't nothing. And that's a lot of the reason why people think, well, you've cautioned me now. You ain't done nothing to me now, then you ain't going to be able to do nothing to me. So at the end of the day, a caution ain't nothing, you know. It's not even worth the paper it's written on.
If it was for me, they can be stuck up in chains in dungeons for a couple of days. That would stop them. And that's what kids need.
When I got out of that police station, all my old mates was there. They was all outside waiting for me, cheering, yeah, yeah, and that made me feel good within myself. I thought, yeah, you know, when I was like, yeah, I ain't never getting nicked again. But that cheering and that, you know, egging me on, that made me feel really good. I felt like I was up there with, you know, up there with the big uns in the group, you know, with the big men in the group. I was a big man.
Nathan, in some respects, you know, is part of that trend, if you like, that's going around this day and age, that children under 17 think they can do what they like and the law can't touch them.
For the budding career criminal, driving offences are the next step on the ladder. By the time he was 15, Nathan, now excluded from school, turned his attention to car crime. On one occasion, he and his friends staggered drunk from a nightclub in the early hours of the morning.
We couldn't get home because we missed the train, so we thought we'd take a car. Instead of driving back, we decided to take it down the motorway.
Vehicle 3 up.
The geezer that was driving stupidly, basically. It was complete stupidity.
Speed still 50, brake action.
When the police are first on your case, it is a rush. You think, yeah, come on, you can't catch me. But when you've been like driving for like 15 minutes and then not giving up, that's when you start to panic and you start thinking, oh no, we're going to get caught, we've got to do something. And that makes you drive even more erratically, do anything to get away from them, and that's a lot of causes of accidents. There was 2 police cars behind us, and eventually they got the helicopter in. We crashed the car and ran away, but that wasn't good, because that really did scare me. That really did.
Nathan's reckless behaviour devastated his family. His bouts of offending seemed linked to tension at home as his parents' 20-year marriage disintegrated. Tom was at his wit's end with Nathan.
It got to the point where I couldn't take any more, because I was now starting to think of not just putting him in hospital, but to take his life.
There was one incident where there was a fight and a chair, Nathan was sitting on a chair and that got knocked over. So Nathan fell out of the chair and he kicked out and Tom went over and there was just bodies sprawled all over the floor.
Lynn and Tom separated in 1996 when Nathan was 16. His criminal activities had also taken a terrible toll on his mother.
It has affected my mum. Really, really has affected her. But when I was doing it, I didn't care, you know. I was out with my mates, I was having a good time. Parents are just there to give you what you want and when you want it, you know. But now I see what I've done to her. I just can't believe I was that stupid to do that to her, you know what I mean? She's my mother and I treated her like a bit of shit, basically. And
Lynn turned to her brother-in-law, Ron, in a bid to help her son get on the straight and narrow. She hoped that Ron would be a steadying influence. 18 years working for the same firm, a keen family man. His hobby is rearing racing pigeons.
I like Nathan, I always have done, and this is why I try to help him. But he's let me down. I bought him them trainers, £65, which I couldn't afford, but I still done it. All he had to do is come and help me clean me pigeon loft down. He came once. He is a likeable guy. He is. I mean, I've always loved him. I mean, he's me boy's boy, you know. I mean, but that's why I try to help him out.
Ron works as a fitter for a Sheppey car dealership. In the spring of 1996, he joined forces with Lynn and a team from Kent Social Services on a pioneering scheme to divert young offenders from criminal activity. Ron was able to arrange for his nephew to join the other apprentices in the car workshop. At first, everything went well.
Brake lights all right, yep. Headlights all right, yep. Wiper blades, yep. You don't do the wheels, they go over there, don't they? Yeah. That's right. Nathan, he was one of these sort of lads that knew everything. He was running before he was walking. He was taking his overalls off, like these, you know, the coats, stripping down to his waist, which you don't do in a factory. Or he's round the corner smoking. Time and time again, I kept telling him not to do this. He mustn't do this. He's got to learn, got to do a job. He didn't want to do any work. He just didn't want to know.
After 2 months, Nathan left his job. Compared with a life of crime, his wages of £175 a week were not enough. For 9 months he lived with his mother, supported by her. By avoiding his friends, he did manage to stay out of trouble, until in January 1997, a chance encounter led to disaster.
I went out with my mates, just like my old mates. I see one of them on the train coming back, and they said, like, come to Canterbury, I'm going shopping. Come on, Nave, drop an acid, mate. Be like us, we're all tripping, do it. So I did it and got arrested for robbery, street robbery.
Nathan spent that summer on bail, waiting for his trial. His social workers continued to support him and arranged for him to get together with his family in an attempt to find out what had gone wrong.
We all dropped an acid and that was it. We just went around robbing people. Seemed like the thing to do.
Robbing people?
Yeah.
What, on the street?
Mm.
And you think that's right?
No, I don't think it's right. I was there, but I weren't taking part. And I've pleaded guilty at court to it, but I've pleaded guilty to being there. I ain't pleaded guilty to doing it, because it was nothing to do with me. I was a bystander. I was there when it happened. I was with the group. But the robbing weren't nothing to do with me. You've
got to get it in your head to keep away from these boys that you get you're telling me you're not doing the robbing, but you're standing there, so your best bet is to keep away from them. I got you a job as I promised. You could have learned to drive, you could have learned mechanics, anything. But you just don't climb right to the top of the stairs, you have to start at the bottom. You didn't like that, didn't you?
I should have been with my mates, I shouldn't have been working. I didn't give a fuck, to be honest with you, I didn't care.
We all want to help you, so keep to your word.
I know I let you down. Given a chance, I wouldn't again, and all I can say is I'm sorry.
You're showing a bit of a man in you now, apologising. Well done. Just go straight.
It sounds really awful, but I sat and looked at Nathan and I thought, it's just empty words. I mean, I hoped against hope that he meant it, but deep down I knew he would be in trouble again. So all the apologies and, you know, I've heard them so many times before, it just doesn't ring true anymore.
Yeah, back to about 7.
Nathan had numerous previous convictions and had been charged with street robbery, yet he spent 10 months of 1997 at liberty. The slowness of the courts in dealing with young offenders has been a source of immense frustration to magistrates, police, victims, and those facing charges.
All I've had is grief. bail conditions and reporting to the police station, and I'd rather it just be dealt with. I mean, I'm looking at a sentence as is. I'd rather them just say to me, look, we know what we're doing and that's what we're doing. Even if it is a sentence they give me, at least it's out of the way. And I know what's happening and I can start sorting myself out properly.
But as the long summer months rolled by, Nathan forgot about the court case hanging over him. He whiled away his time in the company of his friends and numerous girlfriends. The law obliged him simply to sign on once a week at the local police station and tell them where he was living. Then in November 1997, Lynn heard that Nathan had been caught red-handed, committing exactly the same type of offence for which he was out on bail. Finally, the system moved decisively against him. Imprisonment was inevitable. Nathan was sent to the forbidding hulk of Rochester Jail just before his 18th birthday.
This time Nathan was not so lucky. He's been put on remand. I feel so sad. It's his birthday in 9 days. 18th birthday. I should be having parties for him and buying him nice presents. What can I do if I don't see him? A couple of packets of bags and a card for an 18th birthday.
Nathan spent 3 months on remand waiting for his trial. In the desolation of his prison cell, he had plenty of time to contemplate his likely sentence.
Personally feel that I'm looking at about anything from 3 to 4 years. I don't know if I'll get fired because of my age. I mean, I'm used to the waiting now. I've been waiting since February 22nd, since the time I got nicked, so I'm used to it now. I know what to expect and things like that, so.
Despite their stormy relationship, Tom was a regular visitor to his son's prison.
Who's it, young man? Can I draw in up in the pockets?
Come in, take a seat.
When I went to visit Nathan in Rochester, I was literally sad and I felt sorry for him. Part of me did, I suppose that's the fatherly side. I wanted to give him a big cuddle. And he went, all right.
All right, mate. How are you? Yeah, fine.
He gave me a big cuddle, you know, which made me feel very good that he still had love for me.
You got me letter?
I did. It's a one-page letter.
I did.
I asked him the general things, how was he getting on in there, was anyone picking on him, and the visit went quite well. I thought, well, now you've done it. You've now got into a situation that you cannot get out of. You can't say, I'm too young, you can't do nothing about it. He done wrong, and he's got to pay the consequences.
On the 9th of February 1998, Nathan appeared in an adult court and was sentenced to 3.5 years in custody.
Everyone was doing like trying to ride his to help me. I just laughed at him, basically, just kicked him in the teeth and said, look, it's my life, I'll lead it how I want to lead it. And that's how it went. Nothing no one could have done for me at all. Imminent prison sentence. Zero. So, no, they did, I mean, they tried helping me, they did do the best. But obviously, I didn't want it.
Despite all that his parents and the authorities had tried to do to keep him out of prison, this is where he will spend some of the best years of his life. And 8 out of 10 of those released from youth jails reoffend within 2 years. Nathan is now another statistic in the bleak picture of youth crime. Apart from the problem of persistent young offenders, there is a dark undercurrent of youthful violence in our society. During the 1990s, the number of young people under 17 found guilty of serious crimes such as arson, rape, and stabbings has doubled. There were 600 such cases in 1996. A 14-year-old boy, CJ Rickard, known to his friends and family as CJ, was a victim.
I'm a kid. I won't think I'm mean. It's me, I'm a better buddy.
He loved dancing, he loved his music. He knew he was good looking and he played on it. And he was a fun-loving kid. He liked to be the centre of attraction. That was CJ. He loved the telly, absolutely loved the telly. And he would take off the characters like Bart Simpson and Lloyd Grossman through the keyhole. He'd done him brilliantly that if you shut your eyes and listened to CJ, you would think it was Lloyd Grossman.
Beautiful girl.
CJ's father had left when he was a small baby, but he lived with his mother Lynn and sisters as part of an extended family in South London. He was a popular boy with lots of friends.
I'm sorry, but
CJ was fun. He always made me laugh. Always smiling. CJ never looked miserable. Charming. CJ had a very bubbly personality as well. He was always busy doing something. Would never be still.
But like most teenagers, the playfulness of the young boy was mixed with the growing truculence of the adolescent. Behind the laughter and jokes, CJ had a darker side. He was often in trouble at school for being rude to the teachers. And when he was 13, he got involved in a fight with another boy over a girlfriend and broke his nose. He was taken to court and made to pay compensation. And soon after this incident, he had a violent row with his mother.
He stormed out the room as a kid does at that age, in the sense of he's sick of me telling him what to do and what not to do. He's 14 years old. And I've gone out in the hallway to calm him down, and his arms was flaying everywhere, and I've tried to get hold of his arm to calm him down. And he's punched me in the face, and he did knock me flying up the hallway. And he was as shocked as what I was. He's then run out the flat, and then he come back 10 minutes after and said, "Can we talk?" Me being as stubborn as what he was, and I was so shocked that he'd done it. I went, "No," I said, "we can't, so I can't believe you've done it." And I did take him to court, and he was, I think, bound over to keep the peace. But it did change him overnight. It did change him, and he calmed right down.
CJ's neighbourhood was plagued by a number of schoolboy gangs. His mother was unaware that he had become mixed up in a group who claimed to be triads, the Chinese version of the mafia.
CJ used to hang around with a lot of Chinese, Vietnamese people. So it's normally the people you hang around with, you get into their style, their image, you just assume you're in a gang, say you're in a gang, things like that.
For CJ, the gang was a macho pose, wearing black clothes, pretending to adopt a certain lifestyle. There's no suggestion that he was ever involved in anything illegal. At a neighbouring secondary school, the self-appointed leader of a rival triad gang was a 15-year-old boy, Nathan Brown. Like many of the boys who are drawn to gang culture in a serious way, Nathan Brown was of below-average intelligence with an unhappy family background. A loner, he spent many hours in his bedroom playing computer games and obsessively watching Chinese gangster videos.
I think he wanted to be popular and known to people. And he wouldn't feel good about himself hard, and plus he was lonely, and he told me he'd been getting bullied in school in the past, and he didn't have that much friends.
He was bullied, and then he had enough of it. He got in with a couple of Chinese boys. He joined trads. He got carried away, took it personally, thought he was Mr. this and Mr. that, and then that's it. He just got obsessed with the thing trad. Just got obsessed.
This boy was typical of the kind of youth who becomes involved in gang culture. He called his group 14K, the name of a real Hong Kong triad gang. He adopted a Chinese hairstyle, a curtain parting.
He just got into 14k and he started sticking up for himself. Then he started moving around with chads and going to started carrying choppers around with him.
Choppers are the nickname for the weapons which real triads are supposed to carry at all times. As part of his triad fantasy, Brown chose as his weapon this 17-inch meat cleaver. On January the 23rd, 1997, in Greenwich, CJ got into a fight with a member of Nathan Brown's gang. The next day, Brown and 8 members of his gang ordered 2 minicabs to take them up to CJ's school, where they lay in wait for him.
CJ walked out the gates as if to walk home, smiled toward me, and then I didn't notice a group of boys standing there, because it's not unusual for a group of boys to be waiting for their mates and that from other schools. And when he walked out the gates, they just all sort of jumped on him and started hitting him and kicking him, and I was just frozen on the spot.
Then Brown approached, wielding his Chinese-style weapon.
Well, I heard the boy with the machete say move out the way, and then the group parted to let him through, and then he brought the machete down. I didn't see where it hit CJ, I only heard it hit him.
The attackers ran off and CJ was left bleeding on the pavement with a gaping head wound.
When they were running away, I ran past him and I ran up and I saw CJ laying there. The man holding a piece of cloth over his head, trying to stop him from bleeding.
Lynn Rickard was waiting at home for her son to return.
At about 20 to 4, I got the phone call that there'd been a terrible accident, and I think they'd mentioned a knife was involved, and that CJ had been airlifted. Well, the minute I heard the airlift, the phone just went across the room. Sally hadn't gone up the shop, I was in here on my own. I just went absolutely hysterical, and I just knew by that phone call I'd lost my son.
CJ was airlifted to the Royal London Hospital. He was suffering from a fractured skull and brain damage.
They'd put a towel or something over his head, and on this side all there was just laying in a pool of blood. And as I've gone hysterical, he's turned his head round to face me. In fact, I think he was joking with a doctor at the time. And he's turned his head round to face me. And he said, "Mum, don't worry, I'm okay, I'm okay."
For 2 weeks, CJ lay in a coma as doctors struggled to save the 14-year-old's life.
I explained everything they was doing, and I was stroking him, and all the get well cards that came, and the fluffy toys. I described all those to him, read every single card out to him. Every kiss that was on the cards, I gave him every single kiss.
Convinced that there was no hope, the doctors asked CJ's mother for permission to turn off his life support machine.
And I cuddled him, and I was saying to him, "All right then, CJ, they're going to turn the machine off, but Mummy is with you. Don't be afraid." And then I moved my arm round and I put my hand on his heart, and I just left it there until it stopped beating.
The police quickly arrested Nathan Brown and charged him with CJ's murder. But in the months leading up to Brown's trial, they had difficulty finding children among the many who had witnessed the attack who were willing to testify against him.
I was even threatened. I was told that it wasn't just me. People knew that we'd spoken to the police and that we had to watch our backs.
Della Gladwell did give evidence at the trial, which was held at the Old Bailey. Nathan Brown was found guilty of the murder of Carl Rickard and sentenced to life imprisonment. He was 16 years old.
I hate Nathan Brown so much, and I really hate him, but I don't want any revenge on him or his family, because I don't want his mother to feel how I feel. I'm just totally dead inside.
My attitude is that Nathan Brown's got a mum. I don't think for 1 minute she's ever turned and said to her son in bringing him up, join a gang and go and kill CJ. It could have been CJ in that dock. He could have been the murderer. And the reason I say that is, where are these kids coming from these days? I just don't know.
Hundreds turned out to mourn with Lynn. CJ Rickard was a popular boy with his whole life ahead of him, who had died in an act of senseless violence. His mother has had to confront not only her tragic loss, but the dawning realization that her son lived on the edge of a dark and violent world, impenetrable to adults.
I just don't understand how kids can be so violent. I really don't. Wasn't it not enough for them to kick him and punch him? If that's what they feel had to happen, why couldn't they just do that? Why then did Nathan Brown have to use that machete? I tried to get in a 14-year-old's head, but 14-year-olds today are not like how I was when I was 14 years old. They are so different. Do we give them too much as parents? Is society going too fast for them? I just don't know. And I just can't get my head around any of it. I really can't.
1 in 10 schools now report pupils carrying weapons. The year before CJ's death, another family had suffered from this knife culture, and a campaign was launched to raise awareness of youth violence by teacher Frances Lawrence.
There's a very unhealthy acceptance of this culture of violence. It's become the status quo, and I think that we can't go on any longer with this, what I see now as a policy of avoidance. People who experience extreme, intense vulnerability then see with startling clarity, really, other people's vulnerability as well, and the fact that we're all vulnerable, and that none of us should be so smug as to sit back and say, well, it doesn't happen in this area, or it won't happen to me.
Frances Lawrence lives with her 4 children in the quiet London suburb of Ealing. She enjoyed an idyllic marriage and family life with her husband Philip.
Philip was very gentle, very calm. He had a tremendous calming influence, I think, upon everyone who came into contact with him, and would never raise his voice, either at home or in school.
Philip Lawrence was a high flyer. Educated at a top Catholic school and at Cambridge University, from the outset he was a dedicated teacher.
Philip was an outstanding teacher, very gifted teacher. He loved working with young people, and he felt he could make a real difference to their lives, and he certainly did within the classroom. He had a great compassion for the disadvantaged, the underprivileged in society, and he liked working with them in particular.
In 1993, Philip Lawrence relished the challenge of taking over as the head of St George's School in London's Maida Vale. This was a tough urban comprehensive with poor exam results. He became a controversial figure when he expelled 60 pupils, more than any other head in England. But Philip Lawrence also dramatically improved his pupils' academic achievement. He was determined to prevent a destructive minority at St George's School from damaging other pupils' education.
Philip didn't believe in moral relativism. He felt that there was either right or wrong. There are no shades of right and no shades of wrong. Something is right, something is wrong. And when you see something wrong, you must confront it. And he felt, in St George's, he saw that there were dragons all around, and that one should go and confront these and not ignore them because it happens to be difficult.
One of the dragons which worried Philip Lawrence was the growing problem of violence in inner city schools, and he went on television to voice his concerns.
Parents expect that when they send children to school, they'll be safe and secure, and they learn best only when they do feel safe and secure. The changes we made at St George's, the closure of 2 of the entrances and the timing on one of the other and an entry phone on the 4th, to ensure at minimal cost that the school does feel secure.
Wherever he was teaching, Philip Lawrence made a point of saying goodbye to his pupils at the school gates at the end of the day. On the 8th of December 1995, he was standing as usual outside St George's when he spotted one of his pupils being beaten up by a group of youths some way up the road.
Although he obviously must have known that it was very, very serious. After all, there was a whole gang of people coming up the road with balaclavas and scarves and like a small army. And he did what Philip would have done.
Mr. Lawrence ran with them to catch them for the police. I went across the road to see what was happening. I got to a phone box. Then they ran all the way up the road, so then I came back. A little while after, I saw Mr. Lawrence walking across the road with a shirt had all blood on it. And he was staggering because he was weak as well.
The leader of the gang had stabbed the teacher with a 12-inch knife, fatally wounding him. As Mr. Lawrence's pupils and colleagues were still reeling from his senseless death, they heard that a 15-year-old had been charged with his murder. Liaco Chindamo lived alone with his Filipino mother, while his father, a mafia hitman, languished in an Italian jail. In 3 years, the boy had moved around a number of different secondary schools in London.
He was a very immature character. We had extreme difficulty with him in school, in as much as he was a very, very poor attender. He was somebody who we couldn't keep in school, whose mother couldn't keep in school. And I do remember several occasions when she actually brought him into school and stood at the school gates to try and keep him in, but he was off over the back fence.
At his trial, it emerged that Tindamo was known to the police for his violent behaviour. But as is so often the case with young offenders, he had been out of reach of the law, untouchable.
What I felt when I saw how it unfolded at the trial was that he had actually graduated through the criminal justice process and arrived at a situation where he honestly felt himself to be almost above the law. There was an arrogance about him, a confident belief that he was going to walk away from this one in the way that he had walked away from a number of similar incidents in the past.
The murder of Philip Lawrence in Maida Vale confronted the citizens of a comfortable, seemingly safer world with the brutal reality of violent inner-city youth. And when his widow began her campaign to raise awareness of these problems, she provoked an extraordinary response.
When Philip died, people were wonderful and wrote to me from all over the world in horror and deep sadness. One thing that comes out quite a lot is that people feel that they've never been listened to. I mean, I believe that violence has increased in the last decade, and whether this is actual or perceived crime or indeed reported crime, I don't think that matters. The point is that this is felt by so many people, and a lot of letters reflect this concern. And there is a real fear, which seems dreadful in a so-called civilized society, that people are frightened to go outside their front door.
And so Mr. Philip Ambrose Lawrence.
Philip Lawrence has received many posthumous awards for his bravery, and as a way of honouring her husband's life and tragic death, his widow campaigns to turn young people away from violence. Her desire for action has struck a chord with the public and politicians alike. She wants knife shops where boys can buy offensive weapons closed. She would like to see greater regulation of violence in the media. She is the patron of a scheme which rewards children for acts of heroism and good citizenship. But perhaps the greatest source of inspiration was the response of Mrs. Lawrence and her family to Philip's murder when they gathered to pay tribute to him.
Not only was he headmaster, but he was my daddy too. We played football in the hallway, even when he had lots of work to do.
Frances Lawrence found the strength to rise above her harrowing loss, even to extend compassion towards her husband's killer.
I felt overwhelming sorrow and sadness for society that it had come to this, and for Philip's killer as well. Here was a young lad who had not only decimated my life and the lives of my children, and of Philip's friends and relatives, but also his own life.
These are the bitter fruits of youthful criminality. A head teacher murdered outside his own school. A knife culture which led to the death of CJ Rickard. Troubled boys languishing in jail, idle when they should be active. The government has vowed to tackle the problem of youth crime. More prisons for boys are being built. The pace of justice is being speeded up. But there is now an understanding that the answer does not rest with governments, but with individuals, with us and our responsibility for caring for the young. Without this, the future will bring more suffering, more waste.
Discussing the sensitive issues surrounding this series, David Dimbleby and guests in Children of Crime, The Debate, now on BBC One.